All right. Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. We are doing the class Coming Out as Polyamorous. I think this is a great time of year to touch on this topic. For some people, this is the only time of year you're around like origin family, and you just, don't really experience origin families except a couple times a year sometimes. So, the holidays can be stressful when you're thinking about like coming out in any form or fashion. Throughout the class, I'll talk about like coming out as a general concept, not just coming out for poly people. Coming out can be something you do for your profession even. It could be like, oh, I've been an accountant most of my life. Now I'm coming out that I'm actually an artist. I'm gonna do that now. That kind of thing. It can be something akin to our LGBTQ sisters and brothers and siblings. Like that is a journey that we share in some similar form. I am pansexual, but it's a little different, just in the sense that like it's a relationship structure orientation, whatever you want to call it. But there is a lot of lessons out there about coming out from the LGBTQ community. So if you want to read more on this topic, you can borrow a little bit from that community on this topic. Those articles that are written by so many amazing authors on this topic within that community can be helpful as well. And I encourage you to like consume all the material. So, who am I? Oh, we have someone in the waiting room. I need to admit them. Who am I? I am Mistress Cass is what the name I had on the Eventbrite for today, but I use a couple different names when I'm doing various different projects and working with various different communities. But I am like out. I just use those names as like a container. I am Mistress Cass in the kink community, doing kink education or alternative relationship education, consent education, things like that. But I also go by Cassandra Rhines, which is like my married name. And then Cassandra Jones is my legal name, which is my maiden name still. And I graduated with my master's in clinical counseling in August. Ooh, I am in the process of doing the licensure route, and I will be very soon. I will be a sex therapist and counselor for Respark Therapy. I am going through the sex therapy program with the Sexual Health Alliance. And so I am finding a way of bringing my old career in public health into the sexual health realm, into the mental health realm. I will be doing more counseling probably over the next year than education, but like I still see education through kink, polyamory, and all these different worlds as a very important aspect of like the counseling spirit too. So if you want to stay attuned to my comings and goings, you can follow me on the various different platforms that are out there. I'm usually underneath boldly Cassandra, under Cassandra Rhines and like Cassandra Jones. That's usually the title I use. I do have a link tree I'm gonna put in the chat just if you are curious about those things. I keep it relatively updated. I might have a website soon, we'll see. And I am a variety of different things besides like mental health, sexual health, professional. Like I am pansexual, I am disabled in various different forms. I am polyamorous. I have been polyamorous like since I could do relationships. I didn't know that it was a word until I was 22, but like, so I did poly really bad before I was 22, I just say. And, I'm a kinky nerd, those things go together. And I'm a cis woman and I am mixed race. I do have a Puerto Rican heritage. And I'm trying to get past the whole, like, you're too white to be Puerto Rican thing. That's been a journey lately. All right, so that's enough about me. Take my water sip. And if you guys have questions about any of these things, Please speak up. I'm good at keeping an eye on the chat if that's what you prefer, but you can also unmute yourself if you so desire, and you're okay being recorded, that is. That's okay with me. So tonight, these are our learning goals. We want to learn how to identify the possible benefits and costs to coming out as polyamorous to different people in our lives, different communities, different settings. I want you guys to kind of ask questions, maybe if you're under like about a specific type of community, maybe if you want to discuss like cultural settings, that's cool to discuss tonight too, as part of that topic. Our other goal is understanding the intricacies of stigma against polyamorous people and how to navigate negative reactions, because some negative reactions will come up. I'm of the conviction that most of the time people will be positive, but negative shit does happen. We're going to learn how to validate those, though, who can't come out in some settings, because that's just a reality of like being in a minority relationship structure orientation. Like, you can't always be forthcoming with who you are in a setting. You have to kind of like seek out the safety of it. And sometimes it's not safe. Or it's not worth your time sometimes. It's like, oh yeah, usually you only want to come out to people you want to get close to. So sometimes you don't want to be close to people. And that's okay. And we want to be able to support the people who decide it's not right for them to be out in a certain setting. We also want to understand the balance of meeting all partners' needs and safety considerations, and balancing it as like a community, not just like focusing on those individual needs sometimes. While yes, your individual needs are important, if I'm kind of under the persuasion that if you are dedicated to embracing polyamory as a solid aspect of who you are, you can't necessarily stop your partners from being out. You don't necessarily have to be out. If like, you can be polyamorous and not be out, but you can't necessarily rule that your partners can't be out. And then you get into this like navigating where you might be outed through a grapevine sort of situation. So, you know, we're going to discuss the benefits and costs of all those different things throughout this. And if, you know, I'm not clear about something, you ask me to explain in a different way, that's okay. If you have a question throughout, you can jump in. And I love stories too. If you have a great story to share about anything similar to our little story in our cartoon right here from Tikva Wolf from Kimchi Cuddles, amazing graphic artist. Here we have someone coming out to their parent, their mom, and said, "Mom, I want to tell you something." And they're like, "You can tell me anything, sweetie." "Well, I'm poly. Baxter and I have been dating another couple together. It's going pretty well, and we're all very happy." "Wow, it feels really good to come out about it. I'm really happy I told you." "I don't understand. Are you and Baxter having relationship problems? You can tell me, sweetie." Like, people think it's a dramatic thing sometimes, and they think it's like a reaction to negativity. And a lot of the time, the negative reactions can be like erased in the future through like education and acceptance and things like that. Great, broadening your relationship with that person in some form or manner. Or, you know, telling them to behave themselves sometimes if you have to. There are those, you know, family members that, like, if you are completely out, will never like accept that aspect of you. Whatever that out aspect is, whether it's poly, whether it's gay, whether it's genderqueer, whatever it is. There are some people who will never accept you as you are. They want to only accept you as the version they see of you in their minds of you. And at that point, you know, they can deny the reality that, like, they can have their own false reality in their head if they want, but like, you can't change that about them. And you deserve better than that. So don't invest too much in those people. Alrighty. Is there any questions or any like last minute topics you would like to see happen throughout this class today that you would like to throw in before we like get into the meat of things? All right. So I want to start with like looking broadly at general costs and benefits that some people may see about being out with polyamory. You know, these things I think can be applied to other types of being out too, whether it is the artist or the gay person or whatever it is. You know, the one side of it is the benefit of this increased authenticity with others, that like being true to yourself thing that can make you feel very like empowered, strong or centered, or, you know, when you're in yourself, you're a little shaky at times. That's okay too. Doesn't mean you're not in yourself at that point. But there's that general benefit of like general self-security when you know, or you are advocating for yourself in every moment of every day. When you know you are like supporting yourself in every aspect of who you are. That sense of self-security is not something that can be easily taken away by, you know, some other person. Then there's also this benefit of increased community. You like, if you are out about being polyamorous, you can more likely connect to the polyamorous community, and oftentimes other sex positive communities of some nature. Like if you're out in polyamorous, it'd be like, oh yeah, we're going to the Ren Fair, do you want to go? They just assume you're into Renaissance fairs and awesome shit like that. Like there is a lot of overlap with other like sex positive communities out there. And you know, there's a lot more polyamorous people and a lot more consensually non-monogamous people in the world than we realize. You know, and you know, I think we all know a cheater too. So those might not be consensually non-monogamous people, but they count as non-monogamy in some form. There are a lot of people in this community that you can share your experiences with to whatever degree you feel comfortable. And then you can connect in various ways. But you know, there is the costs. There are some downsides because some people are shitty. Some people want to be shitty. Some people don't want to be kind. Some people will threaten you if you don't conform to whatever their ideal of a human is. Some people will stigmatize you when it comes to polyamory, especially when it comes to like sex negativity and things. Like we're going to talk a little bit more about stigma later on too, because that's a big one that like seeps in at all levels as a cost. I think even the people that say they're all about it and they're like really happy and proud of you and everything, they can still have this like stigma cultural wiring in their heads that like makes them do subtle things that are just like, ugh, cringe. Yeah, do you have a stigma share if you want to share?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Fox, she, her. The other day, I've never been trolled on the internet. I've always had just maybe good luck. I don't know. But I did a sex positive video on polyamory, and I just talked, or ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy. And I talked about how it's with consent between adults, that, you know, we don't own each other's bodies. Some people love monogamy. It was innocent. And for the first time, I got so much hate messages in all caps. People were yelling at me in all caps, just like 4 or 5 messages like, this is how people get divorced, and this actually is cheating. And I was so sad. And then I was like, wait, I think I've made it. I'm controversial now. But it was like, okay, I struck a nerve with America, I guess, but there's so much violence and international pandemics and like things that we could pay attention to. And they were so angry about consenting adults being in relationship. It was just a TikTok video. I was like, what are you doing on the internet? Why are you here being mean? But it's just free love. I don't understand. So yeah, stigma.
Yeah. Well, and part of the thing, stigma too, is some people like, maybe it's not even a stigma. People look for reasons to be angry and look for reasons to be frightened. It's like the same subtle urge, like we look to be frightened by a horror movie, I think sometimes. Like it gives you this like serotonin bump, this dopamine bump when you get fear, when you get anger. So like it's a way of coping in a way. It's not okay, of course, but like we do it in different ways in our world. Like some people do it healthfully with going for a run when they're angry. Like but some people need to go rant at someone on the internet. And I wish more people would see where that comes from for them. But that's the thing, we fight a little by a little, right? we do this sort of education so that more and more people understand the ethical ways to do polyamory, the ways to do it where it's not cheating. Because we don't want to hurt people with this. Part of polyamory is like believing in that like free love thing, and that's inherently not about hurting people. That's about like empowering people. And that's always like a hard thing to explain when people really like don't understand like non-monogamy. It's hard to help them understand. And so they might isolate you. Like that is one of the costs. That is definitely a cost, is some communities will isolate alternative people, whatever the form, if they don't like conform to their ideal. It does happen. It might happen 100%. It might just be a little bit of like a push out, like, oh yeah, you're totally still welcome, but like it's a little awkward now kind of thing. And then there might be like microaggression things too that come up where people just, it can get grating at times. If there is a lot of costs to a relationship though, whether it is Bailey, sorry about my dog, that happens. There can be costs to any sort of relationship, whether you are out in that relationship or not. So that is something to consider, like in every relationship in your life, whether it is a cursory relationship, like someone you're not very involved with, but is around your circle here and there, and then maybe it's not someone you want to come out to because it's not like worth the time or the effort. But a good friend it might allow you to be closer to someone if you are out with them. Being out with someone is not required, but I do think that if you are trying to be close to another human being, you should try to consider being out with that person. I don't think it's possible to have a really close, intimate relationship with someone without being like fully out with that person. And, you can have a cursory relationship with a parent and not be out with them. That's possible. But you just know then that you're never going to have a certain level of deepness, I guess. And it can still be a satisfying relationship. It's just maybe not 100% relationship. And that's not wrong. It's just not the way everyone wants to do things. Alrighty, so that's just an overview of the costs and benefits. We'll talk about that throughout the class too. Brene Brown is a very popular self-help development growth person. She has some great TED Talks. Not everyone's a big fan of Brene Brown though, but I really like this quote about authenticity. I like her general messages about vulnerability being like a good thing. Vulnerability is a brave thing. And there is a lot of bravery in dedicating to being authentic with yourself. And this quote here is, but authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. And I think that is a great definition to have for what is coming out, is being authentic with in whatever setting. Coming out is not a one-time thing. It's not something you do once and then you never have to do it again. It's a lifelong process. Not much in life is one time only. Life is a process. Everything is a process. Relationships are a process. You might even have to come out with the same person multiple times if they're headstrong or have dementia. That happens. And so just letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing yourself can be your version of out. You don't necessarily have to be coming out to every single person in your life to say you are out. You are just always authentic. And And, if polyamory became relevant in my conversation with the really conservative, pissy aunt in my family, I will bring it up because I am an out person. But like, I haven't like had to have that conversation with that aunt about polyamory. Like, if she went to my Instagram, she'd see I'm polyamorous. If she went to like different things, she would see it. But I'm not gonna like have that conversation with every single family member if they're not like, well, who I want to have a relationship with. But if you want to be authentic with someone, then you should consider the coming out path. So I have a little case study for us tonight that is going to be our little polycule to explore some of the intricacies of things that happen. We are not at the point where we will be discussing a content warning I gave in one of the emails, but there is going to be the topic of pregnancy loss. So just FYI, if when we start to get more in depth to the case study later on in the class, like if that is a topic that will come up. And if you need to turn off for a second, that's fine. So this is our lovely little polycule. I love my little business stock images turned for polyamory. I guess they probably weren't thinking we'd be talking about these people as a polyamorous family. But anyway, this is Amanda, Ahmad, Mario, and Lucy. Let's see, Amanda and Ahmad come from diverse backgrounds, but are perceived as a traditional monogamous married couple, especially by Ahmad's Muslim family, which he is still highly involved with, even though he doesn't like isn't Muslim himself anymore as he identifies. He's still involved with his origin family. Amanda comes from a traditional and the evangelical background on the other side of it. She doesn't consider herself very religious. She's estranged from some of her family members, but like large family gatherings she still goes to. Amanda is a high school science teacher as well, and Ahmad is a nurse for a local small primary care clinic in their like smallish city. Think maybe like oh God, I've always lived in large cities. I'm having a hard time thinking of small cities. Maybe not like New York City, but like a suburban-ish level area. But relatively knit community. People know each other, but it's not like a large city either. Amanda and Ahmad are relatively new to polyamory. They've been married for a while, but now they're exploring their polyamorous feelings. They've always kind of talked about it, but they were nervous. Now they're getting into it in their early 30s. Mario and Lucy are, they sometimes use polyamory as their label, sometimes relationship anarchy. They're mostly RA. They've been together in various configurations for like over 10 years. But now, currently, they consider themselves nesting partners. Lucy is very involved in nonprofit organizing and event work. And Mario is a popular local public employee, like a small city department manager kind of person. Mario and Lucy have been out in most of their worlds for a long time. Like it's now just like happenstance to them. That like if someone doesn't realize they're polyamorous, they're like, what? Huh? What? One of those kind of couples. Everyone in this new polycule identifies as bisexual. They all have relationships with each other to various degrees. Some are out about the bisexuality, some are not so out about the bisexuality. These two couples met very recently, and they have mad NRE, mad new relationship energy. And, pretty much as soon as they start dating, they know we want to eventually combine households. Like we want to be a family. This is the thing. We found our family. Like that's they're mad NRE with each other. So we're gonna, we have this base couple. I want you to kind of keep these base couples coming together, exploring polyamory, and they know they want to be a family, eventually have children, do all the things. So like they think they want to be out at some degree of another one or another. as we discuss the rest of the subtopics, I want you to keep this family in mind. How do you think this multicultural polyamorous family would adjust to these specific topics we discuss? And then we're gonna fast forward a year and check in with this family later on when they have to go through, the inherent struggles that is life while trying to be a polyamorous out family. All right. So I said we would go a little further in depth into just the types of stigma we might have to deal with if you're trying to be out and polyamorous. There is a plenty. And a lot of this feeds off of each other. A lot of this is related, these different types of stigma. I think the one I deal with the most, because this is the more the cultural lens I take a lot in life, is sex positivity and sex negativity, like that just conflicting area. I see a lot of people assume that like polyamory is just like having all the fuck buddies and just like orgy every weekend and like people assume it's all about sex. And I think this is fading. I think that stigma is not as popular as it was 5 years ago. More and more people are realizing polyamory is about love. There's still some other stigma that's going to happen. But a lot of people find polyamory repulsive to them because they think it is about all the sex. And they're just, not about that. They think, they have that Puritan stigma. They have that thing of original sin is bad, and they believe that, and they think everyone should. But a lot of polyamorous people are mostly sex positive, and we believe that this sort of lifestyle, this openness with love and or sexuality, is good for us and helps us grow and develop and be happy humans and help others be happy too. It's not just a sexual thing. There are plenty of asexual polyamorous people out there too. So like, if someone does bring up the sex negativity angle with polyamory with me, I'm like, did you realize there are ace people that are polyamorous? Because one of the underlying stigmas I see a lot of people believing in is the myth of love scarcity, that there's only so much love out there for every person to receive. And like, if you divide up your love channels or whatever, everyone gets less love. You only have so much. I am a believer that love multiplies love. A lot of polyamorous people are. And that, belief is very like empowering to your partners and your metas and everything. Like, you don't necessarily have living in a view of love plentifulness doesn't necessarily mean you have to be all like compersion all the time. It just means that you believe overall all relationships, all forms of love are inherently good and build more things in positiveness in your life. You can still struggle with jealousy and have a love plentifulness mindset. There's also a lot of like mononormativity BS out there. You're seeing a little more polyamory and CNM in the media here and there. It's becoming more popular, especially in the younger generations. It's nice when I see like someone under 18 like being out that they're poly. I'm like, wow, that's really cool to me. And being someone who like had those thoughts when I was in high school. And I would just, it's still abnormal though. It's still thought of as a little weird. And not in all cultures, right? There are definitely some cultures that have had like a non-monogamous mindset for hundreds, thousands of years. Like even the French royal court back in the day was all non-monogamous. It's everywhere. And like even like creation myths in different indigenous cultures had polyamory. Like it has been around. And that's part of the Puritanism stigma, I think, is this idea that like sex positivity and non-monogamy are like detrimental to people, when really it's like people have done this forever and it's been good for them. And there's going to be like other things weaved into these topics too, like racism and even like I've seen especially big bullshit when it came to a physically handicapped person being polyamorous, because like people thought like, oh, how do you sexually satisfy all your partners? And I was like, that was the biggest bullshit I've seen. I was like, wow, I didn't foresee that intersectionality, but wow. And you know, it will happen. People like will rely on their cultural myths and their cultural like schemas and like judge you against those. So, you know, we will see this a little bit with some of our case study in our different people in our family, how they still try to be involved with their origin cultures, but, you know, still be out and polyamorous and bisexual with their family. So we will look at that with that specific lens at our family later on. So, you know, stigma we talked about. So the negative shit's gonna happen. I want you guys to be prepared and be ready to be in this like I'm rubber, you're glue sort of mindset a little bit, because the BS people spew is not worth like your time getting upset about it. Like if you want to take your anger and funnel it into something constructive, I'm not saying don't do that. Like get angry, you deserve to get angry, and funnel it into something productive though, for your own well-being. I want you guys to grow from anything, and thrive from anything, and heal from anything, because healing does make us stronger. Not the bullshit, the healing. So like, let's look at the process of coming out, because there's going to be like different sorts of negative reactions and negative things to think about and plan for and be prepared for throughout the different phases of coming out. You know, this is like a timeline, I guess. Yeah, but I don't want you to think that everything's linear about this, because like there is this maintenance part like that's going to happen for the rest of your life, that new people will come into your life, new relationships will happen, and you're going to have to come out in different settings. So, you know, we start with, you know, just the daydreamings, the contemplation part of coming out. And this is a lot more about your personal relationship to your identity, actually. This is like, who am I? Conversations with yourself. And then when you get to that point where you're like, this is who I am, you understand that aspect of yourself. You identify polyamory as something really important to you. It's a part of who you are. That's the time when you need to start thinking about the possibilities for each person, community you want to come out in. Like, which communities do I feel safe coming out in? Which communities do I feel safe but don't want to come out in? What's the relationship there? Don't feel safe and do want to come out in? How would that be perceived? Like those sorts of reactions, possible nightmare scenarios, as well as like ideal scenarios, because you know, you can't guarantee anything really in life. I don't want you to think that the nightmare is going to happen though. Like we always tend to be a little negative, I think. We tend to look for the dangers, we look for the risks because we're good human computers, and we identify what's going to be a threat. But I believe that through that process of fear, and that process of identifying threats, we can plan for it in a way. And that's not necessarily planning to overcome it and planning around it so it doesn't happen. It's about planning your reaction to it, and knowing like, okay, if someone starts spewing bullshit at me, how do I want to react to that bullshit depending on who they are in my life? And that's like getting more into the prep work stage. That's like doing more of the detailed contemplation. This is, you know, ooh, for my core family, do I want to do a coming out party? Or do I just want to, you know, have a Instagram post on this day? Or, and what sort of a negativity you think would be more likely coming from those people? part of prep work for coming out is starting to have more emotionally relevant conversations with people. Not necessarily about polyamory, but about like, what do you view relationships like? What do you view gay people like? What do you like? That kind of relevant conversation will help you lay groundwork in relationships for the coming out process. But it also allows you to like build trust and safety. And that's not a bad thing. Then, you know, there's the big, scary first coming out. I have a hard time sometimes talking about the first coming out because I don't really remember what my first time coming out was. Like I just started using the word when I found it and everyone was like, oh yeah, you have a word for that now. But if you are realizing that coming out is the thing that you need to do for yourself to be happy, start doing it in lower stakes settings first, I think. Do it, you know, in a dating profile where no one's going to really see you. You know, maybe build support with the polyamorous community in your area or the national like Facebook groups or something. Start making connections within the community to build that support for you. And, you know, you don't have to be loud about coming out. You don't have to be quiet about coming out either. You do what is right for you. If it is, you know, deciding that you don't necessarily want to have a coming out conversation, you just want to like be dedicated to authenticity, and if it comes up in conversation, you'll come out then, that's fine too. Like that can be being out for you. You know, after your first coming out though, there's going to be this sometimes awkward period where the information of your relationship structure in your life gets ahead of you and comes to people before you talk to them about it. And they might, you know, get a little bit of a telephone game going and they hear wrong things, myths, a little stigma seeps in. Some people will come out for you too. They'll be like, did you hear so-and-so is polyamorous? And sometimes that's not okay for them to do that. Sometimes they're allowed to. And the thing is, be prepared for people finding out without your consent. You know, that's a risk, is that of coming out. A risk of coming out is that some people you don't want to know will find out at some point, maybe. And that might most of the time not be a problem. Most of the time people will like be positive, I think. But there is some risk there. And, you know, like I said at the beginning of this slide, this is not necessarily linear. This is a little bit of a cycle. Sometimes when you move to a new city, you're going to have to go through some of this. If you move to a new job, maybe anything might require a like repetition of the cycle, because coming out is a lifelong process. It's usually not a singular isolated event. Someone asked a question, a good question. Would being outed through the grapevine be unintentional if not everyone in the polycule is out? Yeah, that's very possible. And that's a little bit to what I mentioned at the beginning, is if you are dedicated to being poly and you're not necessarily out with everyone in your life yet, there might be some awkward times through the grapevine where like your partner posts what they think is an innocent picture of you guys hugging, and all of a sudden it brings your like conservative family onslaught that like, who is this person you look like you're intimate with? Yeah, things like that happen. It can be hard to deal with if people assume intentions though behind those sort of things. A lot of the times people might unintentionally out you, and their intention was not bad. They need to understand there might have been some harm there and it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. But we also need to understand their intention probably wasn't to hurt us. And we can't rewind that kind of thing either. We have to kind of just move on sometimes, and you know, deal with what happens in life, especially if like it's a thing that's important to us. Thank you for that question. So yeah, if you want, you can take a little screenshot of this little process. This is not easy for a lot of people. You might have struggles throughout the process. I know I still have struggles with being out about my polyamory. You know, and it's even interesting watching people in my family who aren't polyamorous going through this like coming out process for me, with me. Like, I am very out in my family, my origin family. Everyone knows that I'm polyamorous, that my husband is, and that I have been for a really long time before I even met my husband. So there are times when people think it's such an obvious thing that they just like spew it out at a family gathering to someone who doesn't know. And I can see their face go like, oh, I wasn't prepared. And I then at this point think it's funny. But like, people introduce this awkwardness and I have to then deal with it. As an educator and a future sex therapist, you know, it's good practice in my mind. I try to view it in a different way, but you know, sometimes that thing will happen for you. And don't worry if you have problems with your connection or anything, as long as I'm good, because I am recording and I will post this link on YouTube, unlisted probably, and send it to you guys later. All right. So we can't all be out. And honestly, even the most out person shouldn't probably be out in every single setting. If it's not to their benefit anyway. Maybe think of this as like maybe keeping a person away from you to a certain degree, like keeping a certain degree of separateness from someone by not letting them know that you're polyamorous might be to your benefit. It depends on, you are the accurate judge of that, I think. I trust you guys to know yourselves to an expert level more than I would ever know about you. But, you know, for those who can't or won't come out, we need to try to support those people to the best we can, because they're just as valid as the ones who want to be out all the fucking time. If we need some people to be out, right? We need a certain portion of our community be out in some degree to help like advance the rights of the community overall. But not everyone needs to be out. That's not a burden that everyone needs to endure. And forcing someone to be out, forcing them to endure that like thing before they're ready is just not okay. Don't do that like consciously. That's an asshole move. But yeah, if you do have someone important in your life that is polyamorous and not ready to be out, especially if this is your partner, and you know, maybe they want to be out, maybe they don't eventually. These are just some good steps to follow with those sorts of people. These things like listening, just listening to where someone is, what their reality is like, what their story is, what's going on in their head, what's going on in their world. Practice active listening if you can. That's just the simple act of like not trying to respond. It's the act of like considering the words someone's saying and reflecting those back to someone. Oftentimes we want to empathize with these people that can't be out in the settings, because that can be us in the future. That could be us in a different setting. Maybe we get a different job where it's not okay for us to be out, and we have to like manipulate that to our advantage. Try to understand what it's like in their shoes, but also at the same time know that like their experience is different. It's okay, even if in the same situation you would do something differently. It's okay for them to be different, and decide to do something that you would not do. People don't have to be out if they don't want to be. You need to validate that without necessarily saying like, oh, that's how I want to do it. Like, you can say like, oh, that's understandable. I'd get why you'd be scared. I get the risks. Like, that makes sense. That's validation. It's not the same as being like, oh yeah, I totally wouldn't do that either. Not the same as agreement. You know, and then you do want to empower to some degree. You don't want people feeling shitty about who they are, no matter if they're out or not. So offer ask them, do you want support from me or other people? How can I help you in this journey? What would be helpful? And connect with people through their trials and tribulations. We're all on different paths, we're all on different journeys. And if we could just empower, I think, more people in our community, wherever they are in that journey, I think we'd be better off overall, honestly, as individuals and as a community. We all have our own individual needs. And those are important. Individual needs are very important. But I think there's an overemphasis in our cultural understanding on individual needs. The needs of other people are just as important as your own needs, I think. So when you are thinking about being out, yes, it's a very individual decision, but it's also about like the larger meaning of it sometimes. When you are deciding about coming out, when you're in the process of coming out, you need to consider how it affects the people around you, not just yourself. So when I thought about coming out in a certain, some setting, I had to consider how that would affect my future partners, not just my current partners. Be like, oh, if I invite a future partner who has not been out maybe into this family, all of a sudden this outness energy is going to like transfer to them. And then they might be outed through the grapevine by dating me because I'm so out. That can happen. And so I have to think about that at risk. I have to think about, how outness might affect my future relationships with my parents, my healthcare providers, my husband's healthcare providers, like all these different things. But also like a small part of it is also considering like, is this helpful for the community overall? Not just the polyamorous community, but your other communities, because we all have various different cultures we are involved in, right? We're multicultural beings all the time, I think. Generally, I think most cultures would benefit from a dose of the sex positivity that polyamory tends to bring to the world, and bringing this outness about polyamory and sex positivity to other communities that are not polyamory or not used to polyamory is beneficial for our overall world. That's my belief anyway. But, that community might not like that belief. But, there might be one small person in that group that sees an out person, an out polyamorous person, and then realizes that it's okay for them to be different. And it might be worth it then if only a few people are affected in a positive way, or it might not. You're the accurate judge of that in your life, I think. Your communities better than I do. In the case of my world, being out allowed other people to feel like they were more empowered to be their weird, unique selves, whether that was polyamory, gayness, weirdness, nerdness, whatever. I like talking about this balancing needs and wants approach between individual partners and communities, because I think that is a concept our society has kind of left behind a little bit overall. So some of you might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's the Western psychology kind of core foundation of hierarchy of needs stuff. That's the triangle pyramid on the left-hand side. Maslow was a psychologist who, did some research with the Blackfoot indigenous people, and the Blackfoot Nation informed his development of this model. That is something that, this Western model, this Western perspective really does focus on the importance of individual needs in order to get to a higher level of like self-actualization and then higher. And it disregards a lot of different beliefs that happen in various other cultures, like, multiple dimensions, or multiple lives, reincarnation, stuff like that. The First Nations perspective, and it's, you see similarities in other cultures that didn't have a relation with the First Nation, where they talk about this community actualization stuff and this cultural perpetuity. Like, we want to think about ourselves as someone who leaves behind a legacy for people. So, and that's a legacy, isn't always about like having a bio baby and raising children and helping them go off and conquer the world. Like, legacy can be affecting people in different ways. You don't necessarily have to do it in the have children, or, form a company or something like that. And what do you want your legacy to be is a question I think people need to think about when they're talking about coming out with themselves and with their people that they find important in their lives. There's this, I like talking about this hierarchy of needs thing from the community actualization and the cultural perpetuity angle for coming out with polyamory, because I don't think polyamory is hurtful in any form, if people are dedicated to the ideals of polyamory. And that's why I think, like, someone sent a question to me the other day about asking about being out with kids, and I think we should give more credit to kids. I think kids are often smarter than a lot of adults in some ways. They realize more about the world than we know even. And also, like, when it comes to coming out with kids, sometimes like just being like naturally out with young kids is better than waiting until they're older sometimes. Young teenagers sometimes have a harder time with coming out than a younger kid might have been because they got used to it. Maybe an older teenager is now to the point of like, ew, I don't care, why would I? It's a hard thing to be coming out with anyone. And some people think that polyamory is damaging to children, but it is not. Elizabeth Sheff has done some amazing work for decades showing that like kids are not harmed by polyamory. And plenty of other researchers have shown this too. And maybe an awkward thing at some developmental stage for a kid to discuss this, but not any more awkward than any life thing. I think life shifts, life happens. You might have to come out to your child about like, oh, we're moving to a new city. That's an awkward conversation just as much as like, oh, mom has 2 partners. You're meeting the new one that I've actually been dating for 5 years. Then you want to come out to you? Oh, now your kid doesn't trust you. Like, if you want a close relationship with your child, you will know if they seem developmentally ready. But just FYI, by the time you notice they're developmentally ready to be out with you, they might have already noticed and learned without you telling them. That's a possibility. Kids know more. Kids know more than you realize. And sometimes they don't say it. They'll just be like, and I think we should trust kids more of the time with those things. That is definitely a topic that can be talked about for hours and hours and hours and hours, a subtopic of this coming out to children. And it's a good topic that a lot of people offer classes on too. So like I will be definitely trying to make up some like list of other different polyamory educators at some point and hosting that. And kids coming out stuff will be a subtopic that I need to do that more with in the future. But, we are going to be considering that a little bit with our case study going forward. So, here we go. So, Um, we are skipping ahead about a year from the new dating phase of our polycule family, Amanda, Ahmad, Mario, and Lucy. Over the past year, so now they've been together maybe like 14 months. Like we left off maybe only 2 months in before. It's about a year later, and while the relationships between these four people have thrived, like their individual relationships and their family relationship have thrived. They've just been loving life together, and they've lived together now for a little while. They struggled a little bit with people judging their plan to combine households. About 5 months ago, they've lived together for 5 months now. Almost as soon as they got together, they had decided they wanted to have children as a family. That made it that when they moved in together, it became more of a concrete decision. But, the family did suffer a miscarriage about a month ago, and found it very difficult to share openly about that experience with their families because the baby was extramarital. Amanda was pregnant with Mario's child. Most people were supportive, but there was a little awkwardness here and there, because people would assume Ahmad was the father of Amanda's baby because that's her legal husband. Mario is dealing with some anger issues. Mario is angry at his employer for not allowing him to extend his health insurance to Amanda when she got pregnant, and has some beliefs that if he had been allowed to, the pregnancy would have come to term. Ahmad did have to ask his employer to connect with the local hospital, meaning, remember, his employer was a local primary care clinic. He had to ask his employer to reach out to the hospital about making sure that they got the right documents to ensure that Mario and Lucy could visit Amanda in the hospital when she was in there. That was a little bit of a stressful thing, but because his employer was such a good employer for him and helped him be out and everything, advocated for him and helped him make that a smooth process for the rest of the family. Most people in this family's world rallied around the family. They their food supplies were overflowing. Their fridge was so stocked, all the casserole dishes from everyone in the family. And their employers even granted time off, even for Lucy and Ahmad, and everyone got time off from their employers. Everyone was generally respectful in that sort of way. Everyone was really touched and shocked when Lucy's origin family, who are involved with the local Baptist church, reached out to Ahmad's family, imam, and employer, and organized a maternal infant health event in memory of the angel baby for their shared community. At the event, our case family was overwhelmed by the overall warmness shown to them and the donations made to the cause. They didn't expect that. It was a surprise on them, but they took it in stride. It was hard, but they felt the warmth and the love and the support behind it, and loved seeing their cross-cultural families interacting with each other in that sort of way. Some people in Ahmad's family have misunderstood the relationship. Some people kind of saw it as a little stereotypical polygamy sort of thing, even though that's not what it is, and they have to deal with that stigma a little bit. Some awkwardness with that, but overall everyone's is supportive. Everyone's excited about the possibility of future grandbabies too, even with this diverse family. Mario and Lucy's family were kind of prepared since they've been out as a couple with the relationship anarchy and polyamory over the last 10 or so years. So they've really accepted Amanda and Ahmad, and that side of the family has even been even more supportive because they understood this for a while and it wasn't new to them. However, though, there was some awkwardness because Amanda is a high school teacher. When Amanda was outed through the grapevine at the high school, because she didn't think she needed to be out about polyamory at a high school, but it came out through the grapevine. There was some backlash from some parents, but other parents hosted a class about polyamory, like getting to know it. And, you know, eventually people realized that like this couple, this quad, this family was a great group of people. They realized that like Lucy had done fundraising for the school in the past before they were even dating. They realized Mario was a public leader, like, and everyone was so like supportive of the family from that backlash that like they had scheduled a school board meeting to talk about like the issue of polyamory. And by the time the board meeting came around, the board canceled the meeting like last minute because they were like, this is not relevant to discuss at a board meeting. Why are we even doing this? And everyone, like all the Puritan idiots, looked like fuels. And overall, they had a lot of support. There's been hiccups because life has hiccups, you know, but this family, they knew they wanted to be dedicated to being authentic with each other and especially be authentic with their future children, because that was going to be part of their family dynamic for them. And to them, this means they need to be out, they wanted to go through that experience together early on, to practice, so to speak. You know, to ease this process of coming out, to ease these hiccups, they've been, you know, lucky enough to have some combined financial privilege to be able to hire like lawyers for different things, consultants, experts, therapists, things like that. This sort of privilege has allowed them to like protect themselves legally and emotionally. But they've also been very supported too by local and national polyamory communities by getting involved with those people as well. And knowing they are not alone. You know, they found that when they decided to have children, that like, even though they knew their baby was going to have 4 parents, there were plenty of people in their like polyamory community that were like, oh, I want to be auntie. And, you know, they weren't surprised by the overall warmness. But they really were very grateful, this whole family overall, for like, they knew, because they were authentic people before this coming out process, that they had attracted certain people in their lives that they wanted to be close to. They knew they wanted to be close to their world of people. And part of that was coming out then. So this was their journey to, you know, and being out allowed them to go through the tragedies of life together and to be supported to a certain level. It might not have been possible for, you know, Amanda to have as much support with her pregnancy if it hadn't been for her outness. If she hadn't been so out, maybe, you know, Lucy and Mario's family wouldn't have been there, like taking care of her so much. But, you know, because they were out, they were able to reach out for resources and support and help. And that's generally the reason to be out, is to be able to access community. You know, if that's not important to you, then that's not important to you. But if you do want community, then generally being out is kind of the way to go. Is there any sort of like questions about this family we've been talking about? I really should think of like a cool last name or something, the Coolio family or something that is like appropriate to talk about this family. My next reiteration. Any like scenarios you want to throw at this family and we can see what you think they would do to it? Okay. Well, I think I liked introducing this case study to you guys, not just to talk about the topics we talked about tonight, but you can use this little case study family in your heads to run through topics relevant to your own life. You know, sometimes we're not ready to consider how things would affect us personally. You know, let's think, it might be a good imagination sort of exercise to think through how would this family react to this situation? Not necessarily how would I react to this situation. You might not be at that point where you want to talk about like yourself in these situations. So, feel free to like reference this family through the recording or through your own memories for your own like situations throughout your life going forward. What would Lucy do? What would the so-and-so do? Might be helpful to think about for you. Because sometimes we don't necessarily need to like always put the pressure on ourselves right away. You can take some time in this process. It's no rush. Because this isn't a one-time thing coming out. I talked about that a little bit throughout. This is a process, a lifelong process. Might get a little old at times even. And, if you're not attached to specific outcomes, if you're not attached to being perceived in a certain way by everyone in your world, you can focus on being more aligned with who you truly are. And you can focus on who you want to connect with most in this world. And when you identify those people that you do want to connect with deeply, then you'll know, like, is it right to be out with these people a little more if you think about it. Overall, even if you're not ready to come out with someone, you can still dedicate yourself to aligning your values with your actions. You can still dedicate yourself to being like aligned with your polyamorous values, even if you can't say I'm polyamorous to so-and-so in your life. You can still represent polyamory well. You can still educate. You can, even give yourself a fake persona if you want in some settings, if it's protective for you. But overall, I want you guys to remember, whatever your situation is for coming out or any problem in your life, you're not alone. So many people have gone through similar situations. So many people have gone through this process, and so many people in the future will go through this process again. Generations and generations will go forward with this process over and over. So remembering that you are not alone, that this is, not the end of the world if something bad happens, if a hiccup happens, if you come out maybe a little awkwardly, the wrong sort of way with one person, it's not the end of the world. And there are people there that can support you. All right. I am pretty much at the end of my content, but before I turn off my recording, I want to make sure I offer the floor for any questions that might have come up throughout the class today. Any specific questions about your own experience, any like side topics you want to talk about for a few minutes? I have a little bit of time today that we can discuss whatever you want in regards to this topic. Open floor. I am also really open. If you have a specific question, you want to send a PM to me on Instagram, email, whatever, you can always send me a specific question, one or two. And I'm not going to charge for like a 1 or 2 question thing. I only ask that if I anonymize it, you'd be okay with me posting it publicly as like a, Instagram post or something with like anonymous asks today. So I can share my answer with other people, because, remember, you're not alone. All these people have similar situations they're going through. And if you have a question, I'm sure someone has a very similar question. But, if you ever have questions, now or later, you can reach out. You can find me anywhere. Yeah, this is me in my life. Me and my husband, me and my dogs, me and my partner's friends at my wedding, my BDSM house. So if you guys want to reach out for coaching, for more education opportunities, to follow me, please visit my Linktree. And I love taking recommendations for future classes too. I'm always, willing to come up with a cool new topic for people. I like learning and doing better. So it's my hobby. All righty. I am going to stop the recording now then.